Lena Waithe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having
Welcome
me.
back, I guess. I think we talked once before, but
I wasn't here physically.
you were on the freeway.
Yeah, I was driving.
But this is your first time in Toronto, right?
First time in Toronto. I've been to Montreal, but this is my first time here in Toronto.
How you finding it?
I'm finding it really cool. Really, reminds me a lot of Chicago, actually.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
The last time we talked, it was all about Master of None. It was all about the Thanksgiving episode. Since then, you made history as the first Black woman to win a Primetime Emmy for outstanding writing on a comedy series
Yeah,
for your
you get
work
it right.
on that episode.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm still floating.
You really?
Yeah. I think it's, that's something it's hard to come down from. But I really appreciate the responsibility that goes along with being a first. And I'm also just really appreciative that I was awarded for being myself. I think not just for me, but for people out there that look like me.
Right, and it's a story. It's your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you really care about the craft of writing. Yeah?
I really, really do. I take it very seriously, even though most stuff I write is comedic. But I really try to get things right, and I try to be as honest as possible, whether I'm doing comedy or drama.
Who are some writers you look up to?
James Baldwin, for sure.
Yeah.
Langston Hughes. Love Terry McMillan. And I really like Toni Morrison, Lorraine Hansberry. And, and then, and Sorkin is, phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And also, too, some comedy writers like Susan Fels Hill, who ran A Different World, and Yvette Lee Bowser, who created Living Single. So there are, a lot of writers out there that in different genres that I think really speak to me.
You grew up in Chicago?
I did, yeah.
What was your Chicago like?
My Chicago was really very much a community. I know that's not the first word people think of when they think of Chicago, but I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly African American, and there were a lot of elderly African American people in my neighborhood because they had been there for years and had bought houses there, and a lot of their adult children had moved back to live with them to help care for the houses and to help care for them. And so I was a part of that. I lived in my grandmother's house with my mom and my sister, and a lot of it, some of it was for financial reasons, but I'm really grateful I had that experience because I got to grow up in the house that my mom grew up in. I got to play with kids that were the children of the kids that my mom grew up with. And there was a real sense of history.
You got to kind of live her experience in some ways, right?
Yeah, but in a very different way because obviously it was a different generation. I mean,
Yeah.
she was born into a segregated America. She was born in 1953. And interestingly enough, the house across the street from us, there was a stub in the lawn because someone had burned a cross on their lawn. So there's a real history in that neighborhood that I think I felt such a sense of pride to be there. And by the time I was born and was running in those streets, it was a very different time. And I really had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. And mind you, my father wasn't really around and all that kind of stuff. And people can point to that and again say, oh, statistic and this and that. But I had so much joy growing up. And I think that's what I really try to infuse into The Chi is that sense of community in the sense that we're all connected, even if you don't know someone necessarily.
It's funny to hear you say it's not what people necessarily might think of when they think about Chicago, especially here in Canada. I guess we don't. The only time we hear about Chicago is in the news because we have our own
Sure.
stuff. We have our own stuff to deal with up
Right,
here.
right.
We still got people think that we don't, but we have a lot of work to do up here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're right. When I hear about Chicago, it's usually something the president is saying.
Right.
It's usually something that like a a guns rights advocate is saying.
Right.
Something about that it's incredibly violent, or it tends to focus on Chicago's violent. What's it been like to hear people talk like that about your home?
Well, I think, look, there's turmoil in the city. I'm aware of that. And I also don't shy away from it in the show.
No.
I'm not someone that is pulling any punches. I'm not someone that is acting as if the city doesn't have its issues. But what I try to show is that the issues that the city faces is not the community's fault. It's not it's not their bad. I think there are some things that are systemic that have happened that affect the community that leave certain people without many options. So I think for me, it's really about not placing the blame on the people, but talking about the things that are way above their pay grade and that they really have no control over. And as we all know, there are certain rules that were set in place that if you looked a certain way, you couldn't live in certain neighborhoods. And that we see the trickle-down effect of that. And we see how segregated the city is. And I think that that's a big reason why I didn't really want to focus on the system or the police. I really wanted to focus on the people that the system affects and
Yeah.
the people that are being policed.
Yeah, it's funny because there are all these shows about Chicago, like Chicago PD and
The firefighters and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's all fair game, but I care more about the community. I care about the people. I think sometimes the brown kid in the back of the cop car is just there for story purposes. And I want that kid to be the hero of his own story.
it's about nuance, right?
Absolutely.
So
And
what-
humanity.
So what does nuance and humanity look like in The Chi?
I mean, I think it looks like most people's lives. I think Chicago is mostly made up of working class folk who go to work every day and try to raise their kids the best of their ability and get to church when they can and trying to maintain a healthy, happy relationship. I think it may seem like a novel idea, but it's really important to show people of color in that light. I think it really helps to humanize us and show people that we're a lot more alike than we are different.
I just can't imagine. I know this is not part of this. Like, I just can't imagine what it's like to watch TV and watch the president use your home as a talking point.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine if you're in Haiti right now. I mean, but again, I think it's a lack of education about certain places and certain people. And I also think that's why I'm a big believer in people traveling outside of their neighborhood. I know everybody can't afford that, but I really do think that it's imperative.
And Mark Twain said that, hey, that it's ideologically impossible to be both prejudiced and a traveler.
Absolutely.
I want to play a clip from the show. This is a conversation between one of the lead characters, Brandon, played by Jason Mitchell, his girlfriend, played by Tiffany Boone. Brandon has just lost his brother to gun violence. His girlfriend is worried he'll take matters into his own hands. Take a listen to this.
I need to know you're not gonna do something stupid, Brandon. Babe, you can just go to the police.
Really? The police ain't gonna do
And neither are you, because you're gonna promise me. Promise me.
Okay, I promise. I'm not gonna do nothing. I'm just sitting here looking at pictures because I miss him. I'm thinking about him.
Oh,
I can't stop thinking about him.
I know.
I miss him.
That's a clip from The Chi, an edited clip from The Chi, the new series from actor and series creator Lena Waithe. Tell me a little bit about that scene.
I think it really focuses on how we grieve. And I think for Black people, specifically in Chicago, and particularly for African American men, there's this sort of pressure on them to not just grieve, but to do something about their grief and to fix what happened. And I think that's a big proponent of a lot of gun violence, is a lot of it is retribution. And it's sort of avenging the death of a son, a brother, a friend, a cousin. And I think there's a part of me that is really sympathetic to that. But at the same time, understanding that if you have a life that you're really on a certain path and you have goals and there are things that you want to do, you trying to avenge the death of a brother can actually take away all the promise that your life actually has. And I think that's a really unique place to live and to linger and to stay there, because I do think Brandon feels like he should be doing something. And he also is still in really a state of shock. I think that's something that people don't understand, is that when you lose someone to gun violence, it's extremely sudden. And they are at an age where you should not be burying them. And so there's a real psychological turmoil that happens in these households. And that's something I really want to put a camera on and leave it there, because people often hear about bodies dropping and they hear the numbers, but they don't stay with the families. And I think Jason Mitchell is such a phenomenal actor, and he does a really great job of expressing that inner turmoil that Black men particularly feel, not just sadness, but a sense of responsibility to make things right. And we see Ronnie struggle with it as well, and he sort of does a thing to make things right, to avenge a death. And unfortunately, that decision affects Brandon
And
as well.
it just begets more violence.
Absolutely.
I mean, retribution doesn't end with retribution. Retribution is then carried on because there's retribution for the retribution.
Of course. Somebody has to say no, and it's difficult to say no.
This is a fictional account of life in Chicago's South Side, but you went out of your way to give characters the names of real people that mattered to you. You named them after friends and family.
Right.
Also, important Black historical figures.
Right.
Why was that important for you to do?
It was important so that way I was responsible to them, and I could handle these characters with even more care.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Brandon and Cookie's mother bears my mother's name.
So that would make you think more deeply about them. I
It
don't
would
understand.
it would make me remember that yes, they're fictitious characters, but they represent real people.
Yeah, they're real to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna just do anything with the character that bears my mother's name. And also, Brandon was the name of a kid I grew up with. Cookie was a real name of a kid I, ran around the streets with. I still don't know his real name. I don't know. Everybody just called him Cookie.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to put those memories and those names, and obviously Emmett, which is an extremely important name to all Chicagoans. It was important to again have his legacy live on, and to show that his name means something, not just in the streets of Chicago, but everywhere, but particularly in the streets of Chicago.
But I love how this is also, it seems to be like a check on your own responsibility, not to fall into certain tropes, not to fall into some kind of screenwriting, again, tropes that you could have fallen into.
Yeah. No, and it really made me fight for them, fight for these characters. Because people, who don't come from that world or don't look like me can say, oh, let's have him, maybe he wants a rap career, or maybe this person wants to do this. And I'm like, nah, he doesn't want that. That we've seen that before. That's boring. That's easy. That's comfortable.
That takes some real self-awareness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it does. It takes self-awareness to know that you could be tempted to do something and to put in blockades to stop you from doing it.
Absolutely. And I think particularly with characters of color, there's always the desire to do the thing that makes, especially white audiences, that feel most comfortable. I think, but it's time to make those audiences feel uncomfortable. Like, no, he's not going to be a rapper or a basketball player or a drug dealer. And he's not trying to get out of his hood. He's a chef. He wants to cook. He wants to have his own restaurant. And he doesn't want to leave Chicago. He wants to be able to be in the neighborhood that he's in, and he wants to have a life with his girlfriend. And, and he makes hipster food, and they watch Netflix, and they watch documentaries. And I think that will challenge audiences because they've never seen a brother like him.
If you're just tuning in, this is Q. I'm speaking with Lena Waithe, who's the writer, actor, creator of the new Showtime series, The Chi. There's so much I want to get in with you. I mean, I'm thinking about just locking the door and we can talk for like six hours.
I know.
I want to talk quickly about Time's Up, if you don't
yeah.
mind. The Time's Up movement you've been associated with. This is something that's been created in response to the numerous sexual misconduct allegations in Hollywood and beyond.
Absolutely.
How did you get involved?
Melina Masukis, who is the director of the episode of Thanksgiving and the director of many things. She's
For
a
Master
director.
of None.
Yeah.
And Insecure?
Yeah, Insecure, and obviously she directed a bunch of music videos. One, the most infamous, is Formation for Beyonce. But she's just really, she's a very talented director, but she's someone who is a firm believer in activism and doing something when there's an issue. And so she hit me and said, yo, I want you to come to a meeting with me, a Time's Up meeting. And I said, cool, of course. Mm-hmm. And we went, and I was so inspired by the women in that room, which are very, well-known women, and in front of the camera, behind it, execs, producers, all sorts of things, just activists and leaders. And I really felt honored to be in that room.
I can't imagine what that's like, just to walk in and see all these people.
I mean, it was phenomenal. And the great thing was, it wasn't this Hollywood thing. We were there to figure out solutions. We were there to figure out how we could be helpful. And we're aware of our privilege. We're aware of our platforms. And we want to be a voice for the voiceless. And we want to, and the biggest thing we're doing too, which is why I felt like the movement, or the campaign rather, was on the right path, was that they were raising funds to really help people who have cases or lawsuits against people who have abused their power against them, to really help them to have some sort of litigation and not go bankrupt. And I think that was something that really spoke to me, because I'm a believer in not just supporting people emotionally, but financially as well. And every woman in that room is extremely smart, passionate, and willing to really stand on the front lines in order for our business to look different. And not just our business, but all businesses, all industries. Everyone deserves the right to have a safe work environment. And I think that's really what we're about.
What's your specific role in the initiative?
Well, I think a big thing for me is really being an advocate for women of color, obviously for also the intersectionality of it all, in terms of making sure trans people and people who are non-binary, people who identify as queer, gay, or lesbian, to make sure that they, who if they may not suffer from sexual harassment, they may suffer from homophobia. If you're a person of color, you may suffer from someone treating you like a second-class citizen. And so it's really about expanding the conversation beyond just sexual harassment, but other things that happen to people who are othered in some sort of way in the workplace. So for me, it's about making sure that we have a seat at the table as well. And the great thing is, like, that room wants everyone to be in the room. They want it to be extremely inclusive. And I think there's this sort of misconception that Time's Up is about white privileged women. And nothing could be further from the truth, because I'm involved, Tracee Ellis Ross is involved, so many other amazing women of color are involved in this campaign. And I think it's important that people know that.
That focus on only one issue brings me to this next question, and I'm trying to figure out how to ask you it. So bear with me here. I wrote something down. Like, there's been a big push the last little while around representation and diversity in Hollywood as well, right? And we're witnessing a real watershed moment for issues around sexual misconduct in Hollywood. This is all amazing, and this really feels like I read a quote from you one time that I thought was great. Like, nothing bad can happen out of this. Only good things can happen from this. But we both know that the mainstream media, and listen, I'm a member of the media. The media has a tendency to shift its focus on one thing and then forget about it as soon as it's done. Like, there was Oscar So White, and now there's no talk of Oscar So White in the mainstream media. Now we moved on to Me Too, again, at the expense of the other. Do you worry that might could happen with these issues?
Well, look, I think that we have to be able to focus on more than one topic at a time, because if you just make it about one thing, then you're right, other issues will be ignored. And I think that's really up to us to make sure that we are talking about all of these things and that they fall under a similar umbrella. They may not be the exact same thing, but they all are wrong. And I think it's about changing the way we do business. And it's about really putting people in positions of power who are othered, who are women, who are women of color, who are, queer people, who are trans, people who have disabilities, people who, understand the world in a way that most people don't. I think if we really empower those folks to be in a position where they can hire, in a position where they can make change, I think things will look different. But if everybody, in positions of power are straight white men, then I think that is also a part of the problem too. It's like we have to start making sure that our leadership looks like our society. And I understand what you're saying, and that people can get caught up on one subject and move on.
Well, not even people. Like, it's just like
the media,
and newspapers and Entertainment Tonight and stuff like that.
I mean, even like with Chicago. I mean, there was a time where it was really a hot button issue, and now things. But I get it.
But that work doesn't stop then,
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And also the cameras and the reporters may have left Chicago, but there's still issues that are there. There's still people that are there, and I think, and look, we can't count on the media to do the right thing all the time. But I think it's up to us as a society to make sure we're staying focused, we're staying on task, and that our mission and our agenda is very clear. Because the media's job is to focus its attention on what matters most at the time. And look, this is getting some attention right now, but I think it's up to us in the Time's Up movement and just everywhere, everyone, it's up to us to make sure we don't forget and that we don't get bored with the topic and then move on from it. We have to stay the course. I mean, where would we be if MLK said, you know what, I'm kind of over the civil rights movement thing. I want to take a nap. It's like, no, you got to stay the course by any means necessary.
You've been really generous. I know you have to go. I have one more question for you. The Chi is out now. How you feeling about it?
I'm feeling really good. I mean, it's always a scary thing to birth a baby and then pass it off to the world and see how they receive it. And I've been really blessed in that people think my baby's quite cute and they want to hang around it.
But it's not just the world. How is your community in Chicago taking? How are you feeling about how they feel about it?
We did a special premiere in Chicago for the hometown for Chicagoans, and they really, really responded to it. I was really nervous about it because if they didn't like it, I would have had a completely different, way of going about this press tour. But because they really gave me the stamp of approval, and because they said, yeah, this really represents us, and also people on social media have hit me up as well. That's what matters the most to me is their opinion. And also, look, I'm open to the dialogue. If somebody tweets me and says, hey, I feel like this wasn't accurate, or I feel like you need to show more of this, fantastic. I want to screen grab it and walk into Showtime and say, hey, let's make sure we focus on this second season. Because, look, we can't get everything right season one. We're still human. But to me, this is a conversation. I believe that my art belongs to the people and the people belong to my art. It really is a relationship. And I want to make sure we stay connected and when we stay in dialogue. So that way the show is a real, true reflection of them. And it's not going to always be positive, but it's not going to always be negative. It's about how can we make it as accurate as possible. So I need them to sort of keep me in check.
I thought the show was a real beautiful exercise in empathy in so many ways.
Thank you so much.
And I really want to thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thanks for having me again, man. Appreciate it.